Good day, students. For this topic, we are to focus on the anatomy and functions of the heart. For the learning objectives, at the end of this lesson, you are all expected to describe the location of the heart in the body, identify the major anatomical areas of the heart, and lastly, trace the pathway of blood through the heart. So the heart is a hollow muscular organ, so that means it has an empty space inside, and it is about the size of a clenched fist. And the weight is approximately 325 grams for male and 275 grams for female, the length of which is about 12 centimeters. But you have to remember that the heart of a well-trained athlete, especially if you are specializing in aerobic sports or if you are doing a lot of exercises or if you are having an active lifestyle, then your heart can be considerably larger than this approximate size because our cardiac muscles respond to exercise in a manner similar to that of our skeletal muscles. And also, the exercise could add up to the numbers of the protein myofilaments. Let me write that one. So, protein myofilaments. And that could also increase the size of the individual cells of your hearts without increasing their numbers. So, that is a concept we call as hypertrophy. Hypertrophy. But you also have to remember that enlarged hearts are not always a result of exercise because they can result from pathologies. Like, for example, if you are having hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or other conditions that might be a sign of a disease involving your heart. And also, if this is your heart, so we can see here that the apex of the heart, this one, so the apex of the heart is directed toward the left hip. Okay, so that's for the location and anatomy of your heart. And also, your heart is enclosed by this sac, so pericardium. So the heart is located within the thoracic cavity, medially between the lungs, in a space known as mediastinum. So this one, mediastinum. And within this mediastinum, the heart is separated from the other mediastinal structures by a tough membrane. So how do we call that one? I have mentioned this earlier. Okay, by a tough membrane or sac known as the pericardium or pericardial sac. So pericardium or pericardial sac. And also, it sits in its own space called the pericardial cavity. And here, the dorsal surface of the heart. So the dorsal surface of the heart lies near the bodies of the vertebrae. And the anterior surface sits deep to the sternum and the costal cartilages. And also, as what we can see here, the great veins, so like the superior and inferior vena cava, and the great arteries and the pulmonary trunk are attached to the superior surface of the heart. So we call it the base, this one. So the great veins, the aorta, and the pulmonary trunk are attached to that location. And also, the base of the heart here, we can see in some of the references that it is located at the level of the third costal cartilage. So, third costal cartilage. And the inferior tip of the heart, so how do we call that one? So, the inferior tip of the heart, known as the apex, lies just to the left of the sternum. So, left of the sternum, between the junction of the fourth and fifth ribs near their articulation within, of course, your costal cartilages. So that's for the location of the heart. For the coverings of the heart, we have this double-layered fibrous membrane we call as again the pericardium, which is a double-walled sac. So for the two layers, we have the fibrous pericardium and the serous pericardium. For the fibrous pericardium, it anchors the heart or the surrounding structures of the heart, and it prevents overfilling of heart with blood. So this is the superficial layer of the heart, which protects the heart from overstretching because it contains tough and elastic sac of fibrous connective tissues. And another one, we have the serous pericardium, which contains the parietal and the visceral layer. So this parietal layer, which is an outer layer, it lines the internal surface of the fibrous pericardium. So here, so this parietal layer lines the surface of the fibrous pericardium, whereas your visceral pericardium lines the surface of the heart itself. So this is also known as our epicardium. So in this illustration, we can see here the double-layered pericardium or the double-walled sac. This is the fibrous pericardium, and here, this is the serous pericardium. So this one, the fibrous pericardium, which is the superficial layer. This one, the parietal pericardium, which of course, again, as what I have said, it lines the internal surface of the fibrous pericardium. And next one, we have here the visceral pericardium, or known as the epicardium, which lines the surface of the heart. So this is already your heart, this one. So it lines the surface of the heart, so that is our epicardium. So also this illustration shows the layer of the heart. So the green one, that is your fibrous pericardium. This one, the parietal pericardium. And this one, the visceral pericardium or the epicardium. So those are your serous pericardium, and also this one. There are also 3 layers of the heart wall, so which are the epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. So again, this epicardium is what we call as the visceral pericardium. So it's otherwise a type of a serous pericardium. So this is a thin transparent layer, this one, and it helps lubricate the heart, and it is composed of delicate connective tissues where we can also find the coronary arteries and veins. And next one, we have the myocardium or the middle layer of the heart, this one. So it's the largest, and it is mostly cardiac muscles, and again, it makes up the majority of the cardiac wall, and this layer is the one responsible for the pumping action of our heart. And lastly, we have the endocardium, so the innermost layer. So this consists of simple squamous endothelium layer, and it provides a smooth lining for the chambers of the heart. So this is your endocardium. And also, it covers the valves of the heart, and the main function of which is it is very responsible for keeping the blood from sticking to the inside of the heart and forming potentially deadly blood clots. So here we can see this epicardium, the outer layer or the visceral pericardium. This one, the myocardium, which is responsible for the pumping action of the heart, and lastly, the endocardium, which again keeps the blood from sticking to the inside part of the heart, and it makes us avoid forming potentially deadly blood clots. For the cardiac chambers, we have 4, so 2 of which are receiving chambers and 2 of which are discharging chambers. So for the receiving chambers, we have the right atrium and the left atrium. For the discharging chambers, we have the right ventricle and the left ventricle. And these chambers are separated by this structure. That is what we call as the septum. Another thing, the atria are smaller and they are superior to the ventricles. And also, they have thinner and less muscular walls than the ventricles because they don't do the actual pumping of the heart. That's why they are only receiving chambers. And as receiving chambers, they are also connected to the veins that carry blood to the heart. So they are connected to the superior and inferior vena cava. So in short, the blood is supplied to the heart via this atrium, the receiving chambers. Next one, for the ventricles, we have also the right and the left ventricles, and they are the ones that do the actual pumping of the heart. So they are larger and stronger as compared to the atria, and as opposed to your atria, they send blood out of the heart, and they are connected to the arteries that carry blood away from the heart. So like your pulmonary artery here and your aorta, of course. So that is where the ventricles are connected. So speaking about the septum, again, it separates the left and the right side of the heart, or it separates the chambers of the heart. So we have interatrial septum and interventricular septum. So by the name itself, the interatrial septum separates the two upper chambers of the heart. Or in short, it separates the right atrium and the left atrium. But for the interventricular septum, so it separates the two lower chambers, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So we have here the illustration. So again, these are your receiving chambers, the right atrium and the left atrium. And we have here the discharging chambers. So this one, this is what we call as the interventricular septum, and this one, interatrial septum. Now let us have the valves of the heart. So these valves usually function in order to prevent the regurgitation or the backflow of the blood in our heart. So first, we have the atrioventricular valves. So by the name itself, atrioventricular. So that means it connects the atrium to its ventricles. So we have two types. So the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve. So this tricuspid valve connects the upper and lower chambers of the heart, and it's on the right side of the heart. So in short, it connects the right atrium to the right ventricle. Whereas the mitral valve connects the upper and lower chambers of the heart. Now it's on the left side. So it connects the left atrium and the left ventricle. And this tricuspid valve is named such because it contains three cusps or flaps. Whereas your mitral valve only contains two flaps. That's why it is otherwise known as the bicuspid valve. And another thing, these atrioventricular valves are attached on the ventricular side of the heart to a tough spring, and we call it as chordae tendineae. So chordae tendineae. Next one, we have the semilunar valves. So the semilunar valves, they are named such because of the shape. So they are like crescent moon. And also, they are located between the ventricles and the arteries that carry blood away from the heart. So first, we have pulmonary valve. So it prevents the backflow of blood from the pulmonary trunk, this one, into the right ventricle. So this is your pulmonary valve. Next one, we have the aortic valve, this one. It prevents the aorta from regurgitating blood back into the left ventricle or the left side of the heart. And another main difference of your atrioventricular valve and semilunar valves is that your semilunar valves don't have chordae tendineae. So this illustration here, we can see the tricuspid valve, the mitral or bicuspid valve, also the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. Next one. So it is very clear here why it is called as the tricuspid valve, because it contains three cusps or three flaps. For the mitral or bicuspid, it only has two, and these are the chordae tendineae. So these chordae tendineae are not present in your semilunar valves. So this is your pulmonary valve and aortic valve. Also this one. So this one, this is your chordae tendineae or the heartstrings. Okay, also this one. Now that we already know the anatomy and the individual functions of the parts of the heart, let's now trace the flow of the blood through the heart. So of course, the blood from our systemic circulation will enter the heart. So because it has been used up by the organs and the other parts of the body, the blood entering the heart is already oxygen poor or deoxygenated. So the deoxygenated blood will travel through the inferior or superior vena cava. So this is the first step. Next one, the deoxygenated blood enters the right atrium and passes through the tricuspid valve. And it enters the right ventricle. And now it moves through the pulmonary valve and enters the pulmonary trunk or arteries, where it will be carried towards the lungs. So in the lungs, the blood will gain oxygen, and once they are already oxygenated, they will be returned to the heart via these pulmonary veins. So this one, so in the lungs, gaining oxygen, after that, they will be returned to the pulmonary vein. This is also a pulmonary vein. And next one, the blood enters the left atrium. And it travels through the mitral or bicuspid valve and enters the left ventricle. And now the blood is pumped and moves through the aortic valve, this one. And it travels through the aorta and through the systemic circulation. So the blood going out of the heart is already oxygenated. So that's how the blood flows through, in and out of the heart. So that ends my discussion. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something.